Thank you. I want to return to a point that General Keane was discussing earlier. The Pentagon confirmed yesterday that American pilots are now being told to alter their routes to get out of the way of Russian aircraft. In your long career, you said you can't recall a time in which that's happened. Does that apply to the entire military? Can you recall a time in which any American troop has ever been told to change his action to avoid an enemy?
I don't have a direct reference for it. There probably is something along those lines, but I don't, in modern warfare, since the United States has had global responsibility, I don't have a reference for it.
General Jones, you have a long and distinguished career as well. Can you recall a time in which you told American troops to avoid an enemy?
No.
I certainly haven't served as long as you two have, but I can't recall receiving or giving such an order either. America doesn't avoid our enemies. General Keane, you also said that Vladimir Putin is no dummy. He recalls the experience of Afghanistan when they lost thousands of lives, and it made the Soviet leadership very unpopular with the Russian people. One key part of Afghanistan was U.S. active intervention in providing billions of dollars worth of weapons and support to various Afghan fighting forces. Is that correct?
Yes, most definitely.
Is there any reason to think that Vladimir Putin is going to repeat the experience in Syria that the Soviet Union had in Afghanistan if there's not that kind of peer competitor there to help check through active intervention?
In reference to what actions are you speaking to that he would take?
I'm actually speaking of U.S. actions. We all know what Ronald Reagan did in Afghanistan in the Cold War. Is Vladimir Putin apt to face the same kind of quagmire that Soviets faced in Afghanistan given the complete lack of action of the United States in Syria?
Yeah, right. Clearly, what we have done in Syria, one, on the side to support the opposition forces, in my judgment, from the beginning, has been totally and completely inadequate. And we have had very competent people on President Obama's national security team that were advocating a much more robust strategy as far back as 2012, others advocating it before that, and the administration has never moved. What they did move is covertly dealing with the CIA-trained force to provide them with some weapons capability, but that is not sufficient, and despite all of that, think of this, despite all of that, because of the weaknesses of the Syrian regime, that army's down to about 120,000 from 220 plus, desertions, broken equipment, using 1 or 2 aircraft a day, 1 or 2 aircraft a month, morale low. Many of the conscripts that they should be bringing into the service are the young men that are fleeing into Europe as part of the refugees. So there's real problems there. Despite our faulty programs, the opposition forces, to include the al-Qaeda, have been able to put this regime still in jeopardy for the second time. And unfortunately, what's going to take place now, I think, is Putin is going to be successful in supporting the Syrian to push back on many of these gains. And I don't think we're going to do anything more than what we are doing to help the opposition forces. Those decisions have been made. I don't believe the President is going to take any action, to protect them, which he could, by establishing free zones for them, and certainly some other actions that he could take to protect them, as I mentioned in my statement. So I think we are where we are in terms of U.S. support. And as it pertains to the rest of Syria, we don't have a strategy to defeat ISIS in Syria. It doesn't exist.
I regrettably agree about our policy in Syria. Ambassador Sestanovich, in your statement, point 5, you say that we should all worry about where Russia's reckless behavior will lead next. Most of us have been wrong in anticipating Russian actions in the past couple of years. I would agree with that as well. So I would have a question for the panel about the future, given what General Keane just said. My son has reached the age at which we play a game commonly known as peekaboo. In my household, I refer to it as surprised by Putin. It's amusing when a 5-month-old is repeatedly surprised by the same action over and over again in close succession. It's very dangerous when a president is. So what's the next surprise that Vladimir Putin is going to spring on the United States and the West?
Well, tough question, Senator. I think we may discover, as some of the other panelists have said, that there's another round of Russian policy in Ukraine. I think right now they're unsure of how to handle this crisis, but they have not written off their investment there. I would certainly pay attention to that. If you ask about crises in the Middle East emanating from Syria, you know, I'd look to the spillover to other countries that have been very worried about what is going to happen and have not gotten a lot of help from us. The fact that Turkish airspace was violated over the weekend is a warning by the Russians. But it's not the only way in which this could spill over. Syria, unfortunately, has got a whole lot of neighbors in the Middle East, and Russian policy is going to prolong this civil war. I'd just put one little extra piece on the board for you to look at if you have General Keene's maps in front of you. One country that is not on the map here is Azerbaijan. Azerbaijan is the country off whose coast the Russians fired those cruise missiles. It's been able to sustain its independence over a long period of time, but it's in play. It's not the biggest prize here. It's not likely to be sucked into the war, but the Russians move on a lot of different fronts, and their aim is, as many of the panelists have said, to restore influence over other countries of the former Soviet Union. Watch that space.
Senator Ayotte.